This is Tom Fox. I'm the Compliance Evangelist, and I'd like to welcome you to the November series of 1 month to a more effective compliance program series that I'm running in 2017. This month, we're going to take a look at 1 month of 360 degrees of communication in compliance. This month's sponsor is Dun & Bradstreet. The only thing that is constant right now in the regulatory environment is change. Supply chain leaders and compliance professionals alike continue to struggle with how to best adequately identify, screen, and gain visibility into ownership structures of third parties and or customers so that they understand exactly who they are doing business with. Companies can knowingly finance goods that are potentially obtained illegally or sold on the black market. Procurement teams that are unaware of third-party activities and have antiquated systems, they put their company at risk. Without proper visibility, these teams could unknowingly be funding terrorism or even engaging in human trafficking. In-depth research is needed to identify ultimate beneficial owners and third-party risks. No business ties to corrupt practices such as human trafficking or money laundering is going to self-report, so companies must take this work on themselves and obtain third-party data needed to determine risk, mitigate exposure, and protect their brand and comply with regulations. Dun & Bradstreet offers an end-to-end comprehensive solution to help organizations tackle this exact complexity. Leverage Dun & Bradstreet's complete due diligence reporting to know your vendor and your third-party partners. Do not expose yourself to undue risk. Contact Dun & Bradstreet today to learn more about vendor onboarding, supply risk management, and comprehensive compliance check. This month I'm going to tackle the concept of 360 degrees of communication and compliance. We're going to take a look at it from a variety of ways and mechanisms. We're going to consider the Chief Compliance Officer and his or her role in communications. We're going to take a look at how you can facilitate a two-way conversation of communications while sitting in the CCO suite. We're going to consider some of the leadership and other components of a CCO's role and how they will help you have a more robust and indeed holistic approach to compliance. We're going to consider the bottom-up approach to communications by utilizing communications techniques for your employees, third parties, contractors, and those that may come into contractual relationship with your company through the supply chain. We're going to consider 360 degrees of communications through operationalization of compliance and culture. It's going to be a very interesting month. I think as a CCO you will learn quite a bit, and at the end of the month you will not only have information which will allow you to be a more well-rounded CCO, but bring a much more holistic approach to your compliance function. My year-long series of 1 month to a more effective compliance program and the November edition of 1 month of 360 degrees of communication and compliance are a part of the Compliance Podcast Network. Day 2, social media is a compliance conversation. What is the message of compliance inside of a corporation and how is it distributed? In a compliance program, a large portion of your customers, consumers, are employees. Social media presents some excellent mechanisms to communicate the message of compliance going forward. Many of the applications that we use in our personal communication are free or available to us at very little cost. So why not take advantage of them and use some of those same communication tools in your internal compliance marketing effort going forward in a 360-degree approach to communication and compliance? Simon Mainwaring is the author of We First, How Brands and Consumers Use Social Media to Build a Better World. And he finds or lists there are 3 key components to successful marketing, which I believe are equally applicable to the Chief Compliance Officer and the compliance practitioner in communicating in a 360-degree approach compliance to your employees. Number one, let your employees know what you stand for. Number two, celebrate their efforts. And three, give them a toolkit of different ways to participate in an ongoing compliance communication. In the 2012 FCPA guidance, the Department of Justice and SEC said that the basis of any anti-corruption compliance program is the code of conduct, as it is often the foundation upon which an effective compliance program is built. As the DOJ has repeatedly noted in its charging documents, the most effective codes are clear, concise, and accessible to all employees and to those conducting business on the company's behalf. Two of the primary goals of any codes are, first, to document and clarify minimum expectations of acceptable behavior of the company, and second, to encourage employees to speak up when they have questions or have witnessed misconduct. But more than the code of conduct, does your company really communicate what it stands for when it comes to compliance, culture, and your values? Obviously, formal anti-corruption training is important, but I think it is that more is required to reinforce that your company has a culture of compliance throughout the organization. In other words, what are you communicating? Are you communicating what your company stands for and not simply the rules and regulations of a compliance program? Number two, celebrate their efforts. The 2012 FCPA guidance speaks to the need to incentivize employees in the compliance realm. In it, the DOJ and SEC recognize the needs, or rather recognize that positive incentives can drive compliant behavior. These incentives can be through personal evaluations, they can be promotions, they can be rewards for improvement, and developing a company's compliance program, or rewards for ethics and compliance leadership. Some organizations have made adherence to compliance a significant metric for management bonuses, so that compliance becomes an integral part of the management's everyday concern. But more than simply incentives, it is important to make integrity, ethics, and compliance a part of promotion, compensation, and evaluation moving forward. This moving beyond simply incentivization or incentivizing. To me, the word celebrate means a public display of success. Financial reward may be given in private, such as a portion of an employee's discretionary bonus credited doing business ethically and in compliance. While it's certainly true those employees who are promoted for doing business ethically and in compliance are very visible in public displays of an effective compliance program. I think that a company can take advantage of this concept further through a celebration to help create, foster, and acknowledge the culture of compliance in its day-to-day operations. Bobby Butler, the former Chief Compliance Officer at Universal Weather and Aviation, has often spoken about how his company celebrated compliance through the event of a Corporate Compliance Week celebration. He said that he and his team attended this event and used it as a springboard to internally publicize their compliance program. Number three, give your employees a toolkit for compliance. Another way to have this 360-degree approach is that there be an internal mechanism or internal way for the conversation about compliance to continue. And certainly a reporting line is a way to do so, but there are other ways as well. So in the guidance, for instance, it talked about the use of an ombudsman to address employee concerns about compliance and ethics. I don't think that many companies have explored the use of an ombudsman, but it's certainly one way to help employees with their concerns. Sean McCasey, the former head of the SEC's Office of Whistleblower and indeed the first head of the Office of the Whistleblower, said that companies are generally investing more in internal compliance as a result of the SEC whistleblower program. So he believes this has incentivized companies to move forward. What about some social media tools which you can use? Well, one is Periscope. It allows you to tell a compliance story in real time throughout your organization and beyond. There are both live streaming apps which allow you to create a video and open a portal to anyone who wants to use it. Anyone in your internal Twitter community can click that link and see what is going on with regard to compliance. I think that there are a wide variety of social media mechanisms available to you, then we'll explore those in later podcasts this month. There's much to be learned by the Chief Compliance Officer and the compliance practitioner from the disciplines of marketing and social media, particularly around 360 degrees of communication and compliance. These concepts are useful to companies in getting their sales pitches out and can be a great help to you in collaborating and marketing throughout your organization. I hope that you will find these techniques useful for your company. So what are today's 3 key takeaways? Well, first, let your employees know what you stand for. You celebrate those efforts going forward by using all forms of communication in a 360-degree approach. Number 2, you do not need to celebrate simply the compliance program, but celebrate your employees. Have them talk about what they have done successfully to implement or operationalize compliance, and then use that going forward as case studies, as compliance moments, as indicia that not only do the compliance practitioners and compliance departments support compliance, but the individual employees too. And 3, you do that by number 3, which is giving employees a toolkit for using social media around compliance. So do they have access to your internal Twitter? Do you have a Periscope type application? Do you have other applications that you can use internally? This is Tom Fox. Thank you very much for listening to day 2 of 1 month of 360 degrees of communication and compliance, and I hope you will join me tomorrow for day 3. Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox, and I'd like to thank you for listening to this episode of 1 month to 360 days of communication and compliance. If you have listened to this podcast on iTunes, I would greatly appreciate it if you would rate our podcast, as it would help in our rankings and also help get the word out about the only daily compliance podcast involving the nuts and bolts of compliance. Also, if you have any questions, please feel free to email me at tfox@tfoxlaw.com. Finally, I'd like to thank our sponsor for this month, Dun & Bradstreet. I hope you will join me tomorrow for another episode. The podcast series in November, 1 month to 360 degrees of communication, is a part of the Compliance Podcast Network.